every now and then I will share a map drill or a tea time, a themed tea time on my Instagram, and I'll get a few questions about how I teach geography. So I thought I would do a quick overview for you today. And there's actually a few different ways that we teach geography to our kids. And I'll start with this. A couple of years ago, I purchased this Simply Charlotte Mason Visits to Europe. I purchased it on a PDF and then just printed it at Staples. And I love this, and so I highly recommend this to anybody who's needing a little bit of assistance with teaching geography. But as the years have gone on, I've gotten very comfortable with the method, the Charlotte Mason method of teaching geography, and I've kind of gone out on my own. So I wanted to start by saying that this is a great resource if you're interested. So the first thing we do is map drill, and so that's something we do every morning. I keep a map on the kids' clipboard here. And right now we're doing a Europe map because we are doing the Middle Ages with Story of the World, and there's a lot of talk about the European countries, and a lot of the map work that's in the Story of the World is this whole area. So what we do basically is every morning when the kids are doing their clipboard work, they'll bring their clipboards to me and they will tell me off of memory what each country is. Now, if they were better writers or a little older, then they would fill it in themselves, but right now I just have them do it orally. So they tell me every country that they know, and then after a few times when I feel like they definitely weren't shaky on any of the countries, then I will pull out a full-size map here. And I'll allow them to choose another country to add to what they're memorizing. For example, right now they just added France to, on Thursday, they added France to what they're memorizing. So up until then they had done some countries around it, and then they chose France as the next one to memorize. So once I feel like they're able to name everything that they already know and remember France on their own, and usually the first couple of times they're like, what's it start with, because it's hard for them to remember. And so once they confidently name France every single time, I'll say, okay, pick another country, and they really love choosing on their own. And I found out a few years ago, or a couple years ago, I started by telling them what their next country was, but I find when they kind of look on the map and choose one themselves, then they're more excited to memorize it. So they start by doing that, and then they locate it on their map, and often I will let them, if you can see the G here, oftentimes I will let them write a letter to help them remember it the first few times, then I'll give them a fresh map after the first couple of times with that country. So map drill is separate from our geography lessons this year. If you're doing the Visits to book that I showed you, then the map drills will be a part of what you're studying. For example, if you're on your map drill and you're on Russia, then you'll probably be studying Russia in the coming chapters in that book. So the next thing then is these books, Material World and Hungry Planet. So these were suggested by Sonia Schaefer. She runs the Simply Charlotte Mason company. And I went to a conference and went to a couple of her sessions, and I love both of these books, so I'll link them below. Material World basically takes families from all over the world and lines them up in front of their homes with everything they own, everything from bookshelves and cabinets to beds, toys, furniture, everything. And it shows you what their homes look like and what their materials look like, because it's important for kids to not just know the currency and the language of a country, but also really understand the people and the culture. So here is a picture of, let's see here, a family in South Africa. And oftentimes there will be a couple of families in one nation if the country has a large divide in their economics. So here's from Ethiopia. And here is Japan. So my kids love to go through and look at these images in here, and there's a lot of facts listed, and then they can read the information there as well. And then Hungry Planet is similar. It's the same idea, but it is with food. And then in Hungry Planet, there are recipes. So when we're using these books as our resources for geography, we will try to make the recipes that are a part of that chapter. So again, for example, you can't even pronounce that, so I'm not, okay. Here's Cuba. This is a family with all of their food, a 1 week's grocery trip. And it gives you the breakdown of cost of everything. And then there is a recipe for their family's rice and beans. And it does name the families, so this is one family in Cuba, and then sometimes, I don't know if this is one of the countries that has, no. It's not one that has two different chapters on that country, but some of them do in this as well. So we use those as resources quite often, and I'll explain when we pull those out. So my son, Eli, my preschooler, he is using 5 in a row. And so when we are rowing a book that has a very specific setting, I'll use that and I'll combine that with my older kids, and that will be their geography for the week. So we only do geography. We do map drills every day. We only do geography 1 day a week, and that is Wednesdays. So we have time to sit and do projects and activities together. So, for example, Eli did the bee tree for school a few weeks ago, and so that is set in Michigan, and so the kids they did a little bit of a study on Michigan, wrote some facts about the state, and then on the back here I just drew out and copied a little picture for them where they would go ahead and draw the different settings that they came across in the book. So in this book, they start at the cornfield, go to the Creekway, go to Dietz Junction, St. Joe River, Bird Talk, Fellow Ridge, and on and on and on. And the geography in the bee tree specifically went over the different scenery and settings. So they had to know what a creek was, they had to know what a bluff was, they had to know what a meadow was, and so they just drew that. And that's all geography in my book. So that was their geography that week, along with the other projects that they did with Eli, like beeswax candles and things like that, making biscuits, everything that went along with the story. And then another week, Eli wasn't doing a 5 in a row book, so there wasn't any specific information for how to teach the geography of that area. We were just doing Our Great Big Backyard, I think it's called. I will also link that below. It is written by Laura Bush and her daughters, I believe, and that's all about our national parks. So for that week, geography, I put on a documentary about our national parks, and then I had the kids, just so I had some kind of material to stick into their portfolios, I had the kids draw a picture of one of the national parks that they would like to visit. This is Jesse's. He drew a picture of Everglades National Park, but they watched documentaries on the national parks, and that was geography. Then for another week, Eli did How to Make an Apple Pie and See the World for 5 in a row, which in that book they visit England, France, New England in America, they visit Jamaica, they visit Sri Lanka. So there's way too many countries for me to just kind of hit them all in 1 week. I don't want to give them information overload, because I'm not looking for my kids to memorize facts. I'm looking for them to make a connection with a piece of geography, whether it is learning how to read a map with these different, learning how to read a map with all these different areas, if it is just thinking about things we have in our own country, if it is looking at a state specifically, or if it's looking at a complete country. I just want them to make some kind of a connection and have a story to kind of attribute it to and connect it to, and then learn about something geographical. So for that week, I chose just to do the oceans, because they crossed oceans and they were flying. They took boats through the oceans. And so that week we talked about the locations of the oceans. We did a science experiment with evaporating salt from the salt water, but then we sang a song, and I just wrote this out for them again, so I had some kind of something to stick in their portfolio if I needed to. This by no means showcases everything we did in geography that particular Wednesday, but it just gives me something to stick in their portfolios so that I can remember as I go back what we did that week. So this was just for them to color and then fill out the names of the different oceans. So that is another example. And then last but not least, the other way we will do it if we're not doing a worksheet, if we're not watching a documentary, if we're not reading a 5 in a row, or if we're not doing a 5 in a row activity, is to do a themed tea time or a cultural experience. So when we did The Story of Ping, which is also a 5 in a row book, this is set in China. So we have very good friends who are Chinese, and we read this story the same week that we went, and they took us to an authentic restaurant. We had dim sum, and they took us to a Chinese market where they helped us with the speaking and the ordering and everything. And so when we were at that market, which was like the field trip for this book, I gathered a bunch of treats and I did a themed poetry tea time for The Story of Ping. So we did a whole Chinese theme with our tea time that week. So that's another way, letting them taste the foods, letting them smell the smells, and kind of immerse themselves in it if it's possible. I remember in the town that I grew up, just outside of our town, there was a little German town that we would go to on field trips. When I lived in Miami, there were all sorts of Cuban markets and restaurants. So I'm sure that there's stuff near you where if you're studying a story or if you're wanting to study a particular area, that there's some different places you can go and visit and just put yourselves out there and try something new. So those are the traditional ways that, based on what Eli's learning, I kind of group the kids in and do geography. So at the end of this year, it might look strange. They might have they're gonna have some China, they're gonna have some ocean, they're gonna have Michigan, they might have New England, and you know, it's all over the place. But over the course of years, because I'm not just homeschooling them this year, I'm homeschooling them all the way through, hopefully. So I'm not just building on one calendar year, I'm building on their entire lives. So if we just study, you know, 5 of our states in America this year, and a couple of European countries, and an Asian country, and a country in South America, then the following year we do a few more, and who knows what they'll have in their memory banks by the time they graduate high school. The map drills are very important though, because I don't want them to be, I'm not giving them a map of the entire world, and they're not labeling Michigan and Japan and things like that, because that would be a little too scatterbrained. So our geography basically on Wednesdays is just some kind of information on the culture and some kind of an experience, whether it's a documentary or a poetry tea time about that country. And if for some reason Eli's not doing any kind of a book that we could pull anything from, then the kids will just pick a country on their map drill, and we will just go ahead and use these books use these books to research it. So when we did China, and when we're coming up on Australia, we will be using these books. Besides just the tea time and just the activities we do, we look through these books as the first thing we do. Whether we read all the information, not always, but they always look at the pictures and get a sense of the families who live there. So we are coming up next week. I'm doing the pumpkin runner with Eli, which is set in Australia. So the kids are going to be doing the recipe in here. And I can't remember what it is, the recipe that's in Hungry Planet. It is a recipe for avocado and mango salad. So they're going to be using these books when we're studying Australia and making that recipe as well, which I benefit from, certainly. So anyway, that's just a brief overview of how we do geography. I hope it didn't seem too scatterbrained. If it did, because I'm filming this at 10 at night, leave me all the questions you have below and I would gladly answer. But basically, throwing it back to the beginning, if you would like to do a Charlotte Mason type of geography, the Simply Charlotte Mason Visits to Europe is awesome. And all you need to do that are these 2 books, and your kids would love looking through them, I'm sure. So I hope that answered any questions you guys have, and I'll see you later.